The door splintered inward, and the house exhaled metal. Two bodies lay where family used to stand, one survivor pressed against a wall, whispering a single name that didn't match either victim. Detectives stepped into heat and bleach, over overturned photos, smiling at nobody. A phone buzzed on the counter, screen locked, the sister's contact pinned at the top. The profile starts here. Forbidden love, dead parents, a home recording everything except the truth. Was this a murder-suicide pact gone wrong, or a clean double kill disguised by panic? The thing is, the first clue is always hiding in plain sight. Consider the unit, not the individuals. That's how you read a house like this. He entered at 12 with a backpack and a rehearsed, polite smile. Adoption papers made it official, but domestication took longer. He learned how this family did grace before dinner and gratitude texts after sleepovers. He learned which rooms stayed dim to protect the mood, and which lies were allowed if they avoided embarrassment. On paper, they were pillars, Sunday service, food pantry photos. The father's handshake was firm, the mother's laugh practiced, their calendar was full, their secrets were scheduled. Across that system, the daughter shone like a polished trophy. Honor roll certificates nested like feathers in the hallway frames. She had the soft voice adults praise and the hard stare that appears when they leave. She wore the uniform of the golden child, a perfect braid, a perfect curfew, a perfect story about who she was. She also kept a cracked phone case with a compartment for pills labeled vitamins, though no doctor had prescribed them. Stress, she said. Everyone nodded. Early bridges formed in the shadows. They traded confidences in the laundry room while the dryer masked tone, shared headphones in the back seat. Late-night drives to nowhere under the pretense of returning library books. She covered for his forgotten chores. He took the blame for her late arrival. Micro-lies, the kind that grow roots. This is where secrecy becomes routine. If you normalize concealment for small things, you've built an architecture for the big ones. The parents called their surveillance care. Location sharing on every phone. Cameras disguised as teddy bears and air purifiers. A family email account for safety, where drafts were sometimes read before they were sent. The thing is, oversight can feel like oxygen to the watcher and waterboarding to the watched. When the mind senses constant audit, it moves underground. He created secondary passwords. She learned how to smile while withholding. The boundary crossings began at the level of thought. Motive grows from pressure and opportunity. Pressure, a home where reputation mattered more than vulnerability. Opportunity, two teenagers orbiting the same sun, asked to call each other siblings while hormones and proximity burned away labels. They didn't plan the transgression. Transgressions are rarely planned. They happened into a language of shared risk. They practiced pretending. They got good at it. You can map the first fracture to a missed curfew. He walked her in at 12:46, 2 minutes after the alarm's grace period. The father stood in the kitchen in gym shorts, a mug half full, a Bible open, but unread. The mother leaned against the island, hand flat like a stop sign. No shouting, only a sermon about boundaries and the illusion of control. He took it on the chin. She nodded dutifully. Upstairs, they laughed into pillows and texted from 10 feet apart. That's when a rule stops being a rule and becomes a dare. Their public life was curated. Photos of them side by side at a fundraising dinner, the caption, "Family first." He learned how to tie a tie from a tutorial. She straightened the knot. He thanked donors. She poured punch. Under the table, their knees aligned for one dangerous second too long. Eye contact is its own language, restraint, its dialect. That night, they walked the dog along the cul-de-sac 3 times after bedtime. The dog grew bored. Their voices didn't. Here's where you analyze motive seeds. Secrecy breeds escalation because concealment itself becomes intoxicating. Shame floods the nervous system, and relief becomes a drug. Each risk taken teaches the brain a false lesson. I can get away with this. He deleted messages. She perfected alibis. He learned the timing of camera blind spots. She learned which apps vanished notifications from the lock screen. Their world narrowed to a tunnel where every exit said, "Emergency." The parents, meanwhile, doubled down on image. A new photo wall went up, frames aligned by level and laser. Church elders complimented their beautiful kids. They accepted the praise like rent paid. At home, the father's rules acquired edges: no locked doors, doors ajar during phone calls. The mother praised honesty while opening mail that wasn't hers. If you're charting escalation, note that sanctimony often precedes discovery. Now put the mind in a box, that's the analogy. Once you open it, you can't repack it the same. Bit by bit, they opened theirs to each other. They said, "I can't tell anyone else this." That sentence creates a vault. Vaults collect valuables and liabilities without discrimination. The weight builds. The hinge groans. She began to fracture in private. In the mirror, she pressed a finger to her lip like a secret sign. He worked out at odd hours, chasing numbness. They performed normal together with surgical precision. Report cards, soccer games, polite jokes. Then, an ordinary slip. A sweater left in his room, unmistakably hers. The mother found it while changing sheets. She held it like a snake shed. Her eyes narrowed, not at the fabric, but at the story gap. She didn't confront, she watched. Here's where the pressure cooker metaphor becomes literal. Heat, constant and unseen, a gauge moving. The family smiled. The parents tightened. The kids adapted. Something had to vent. When it did, it wouldn't sound like a scream. It would sound like a whisper in the dark, a breath held for too long, breaking into the open. That's the prelude to any house that later smells like metal. 3 hours after the fundraiser smiles, they sat in a parked car behind the closed pool, engine ticking as it cooled. The sodium light above them buzzed, no music, no excuses left to rehearse. He said he couldn't breathe in that house. She said she understood. He looked at her mouth too long. She leaned first, barely, and the kiss happened like a dropped glass, not planned, not slow, immediate, loud inside their heads. When it broke, silence didn't return. It multiplied. Guilt works like static. It filled the cabin, hissed between them. She pressed her forehead to the steering wheel and laughed once, scared. He said, "We bury it." She nodded too fast. A pact forms not from courage, but from the illusion that control can rewind time. They drove home through empty streets and said nothing except logistics. Tomorrow, act normal. Delete everything. Avoid eye contact in hall light. Smile at breakfast. Avoidance didn't reduce contact. It increased it. That's the paradox. When you swear to bury a thing, you start visiting the grave. He deleted threads, then texted from a different app. She wrote alibis in her notes and practiced them in the mirror. They began staging distance in public, then compressed in private. The mind, once split, seeks its twin. A sweater made the first crack visible. It was her soft gray one, the one with a loose cuff she fidgeted with when anxious. It lived on the back of his chair for a night too long. The mother found it while changing sheets, routine chore, routine inspection. She held the sweater by 2 fingers as if it were damp. Her eyes didn't flinch. She folded it, placed it on his desk, and straightened the corner of a framed photo that needed no straightening. Surveillance doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just aligns things. His phone became a loaded object. He set a longer passcode, changed the predictive text settings, moved her name to a nickname with an emoji that made sense to no one but him. He used the Notes app as a draft space, never sending, always copying. She crafted alibis with timestamps, study group, choir practice, a mock trial session. She liked the control of writing the narrative before anyone else did. They pretended to be brave. They told themselves it would stop. But the brain has a hard time moving backward on a sensory map it just discovered. Every day they drew the line, and every night they stepped over it by a half inch until the line was behind them. Half measures became ritual. The theology of the house, confession and forgiveness, never quite reached them, because their sin had a feedback loop. Each concealment reinforced the bond. Then came the scare that removes illusions. It started with her calendar app, a missed period tracker, dot turning from green to red. She stared at the screen until it blurred, then at the ceiling until the ceiling turned into a map of consequences. The next day, she told him behind the snack aisle at the grocery store, eyes fixed on a shelf of canned peaches. His face went gray, then blank. Fear isn't one feeling, it's a stack. They ran decision trees, pharmacy or clinic, test now or wait, tell no one or tell someone carefully chosen. The house felt smaller that week, the cameras louder. At night, she typed, "How to disappear," and deleted the history. He searched for job cache under the table. He also searched for laws about step-siblings and adoption legal incest and state lines. The search results didn't help. Shame is bad at legal research. They bought a test with exact change and a lie ready for the cashier. Back at the house, she hid in the downstairs bathroom with the fan on, instructions open on the counter, timer set for the longest 2 minutes invented. He waited in the hallway, hands on the door jamb, counting breaths. The timer rang. Negative. Relief entered like a cough. It didn't comfort. It stunned. They leaned into each other in the cramped hall, then sprang apart at a footstep upstairs. Relief doesn't resolve compulsion. It accelerates it. The brain incorrectly tags danger as intimacy. That night, they swore again. This time, to stop. They lasted 3 days. On the 4th, the note appeared on the fridge, a square of white paper torn from a legal pad magnetized under a photo of all 4 of them at the beach. The handwriting was blocky, careful, the kind someone practices to look generic. 2 sentences. "I know what you did. End it." No signature, no flourish, just the weight of being seen. First reaction, suspect each other. That's how paranoia works. She thought he might have written it to scare her into stopping. He thought she might have written it to test his loyalty or create a paper trail she could control. They examined the letters like they were fingerprints. Who forms their R like that? Who puts the dot over the I directly centered? Neither admitted it, but both knew the note had the tone of the house. Directive, moral, anonymous. Then they expanded the suspect pool. A parent? A friend. A youth leader with a permanent smile. He checked the cameras in the app. One angle in the kitchen had a 30-minute gap the night before. He told himself it was lag. She received a call that night from a blocked number. Breathing. Then a click. Nothing overt, just that subtle insertion of fear that turns every ordinary object into a signal. They rationalized, a prank, a coincidence. But their bodies didn't buy it. He slept with his shoes on. She started keeping the bathroom door locked even when brushing her teeth. They decided, in a whisper that sounded like begging, to end it. They even drafted texts to each other forbidding contact, then didn't send them. Meanwhile, he began gathering cash, small bills from his part-time job stashed in a tin labeled batteries. She cleaned out a childhood purse and found a forgotten 20. These are the behaviors that mark a pivot. When kids start hoarding like refugees, watch the timeline. The father changed the Wi-Fi password for security. The basement door gained a new lock. The mother began using words like integrity and purity in casual conversation, as if salt could be sprinkled on rot and make it meat again. The atmosphere shifted. They felt her eyes before they saw them. Control tightened like a tourniquet. They told themselves they could outlast it. They were wrong. The note remained under the magnet like a steady heartbeat. They stood with the fridge open until the motor kicked on, both pretending to read a grocery list that wasn't there. Then they split along instinct. He went to hardware and code. She went to faces and tone. He started with the home network, router logs, device names. A phantom MAC address had pinged at 2:11 a.m., then vanished. Could be a neighbor's phone skimming range, he told himself. Could be nothing. He toggled the kitchen camera feed and scrubbed back 30 minutes of static. Not a blackout, just a frozen frame of an empty island, the fruit bowl forever unbruised. He checked the others. Hallway, living room, front door. All clean, which made the gap matter more. She scanned the handwriting again. Block letters, consistent spacing, no flourish even on the E's. That's a person who practices self-erasure. She thought of their father's sermon notes in tidy cursive. Their mother's Lupin grocery lists. It didn't match. She moved to friends. Who knew enough to threaten? Who hated them enough to write "end it"? A youth leader once told her that generalized guilt is the devil and specific conviction is God. This note felt specific. Her phone vibrated. Unknown caller. She stepped into the pantry and answered. Breathing. Close, controlled. Then a click. She didn't say hello. She didn't say anything. She pressed end and stared at the flour bin until the label blurred. When she came out, she told him it was a wrong number. He could smell the lie. It had the same shape as his. He waited until the house slept and pulled out the step stool. He unscrewed the kitchen camera from the soffit and checked the SD card. Empty, not wiped, unused. The feed went somewhere else. He traced the wire back into the wall and found nothing but drywall. He checked the app again. The devices were cloud-based. Whose cloud? He couldn't see. That was the point. He went room by room, turning his head like prey, vents, smoke detectors, that air purifier with the smiling sticker. He pressed his ear to the grill and heard only the lipless rush of air. Paranoia feels like competence until it flips and makes you ridiculous. He flipped, but the ridiculous often saves you. They regrouped at the kitchen table. He showed her the phantom network ping. She told him about the call. They said, almost together, "We stop." Then they did what people do when they swear off a thing. They reached for it to steady themselves and found it gone. The absence felt like withdrawal. But the threat changed the physics. This wasn't just about them now. Exposure meant exile. It meant legal ruin if the house turned vindictive. He pictured cops moving through rooms that once held birthday candles. She pictured small-town gossip stretched over years like plastic wrap, smothering and clear. The note had a second line. End it. That word had too many meanings. They workshopped suspects with the precision of defendants. The father? The tone didn't fit. He preferred confrontation dressed as counsel. The mother? She liked control, not anonymity. A friend? Too risky without proof. The youth leader? He had access to their moral vocabulary. A neighbor with a camera pointed wrong? Possible. A nobody with a number and time to enjoy fear? Also possible. When your world shrinks, everyone becomes plausible. He tried to buy time. He texted her on the old app with coded words about homework and borrowed staplers and got nothing back. She had turned off read receipts. He took that personally. He shouldn't have. Silence was armor. Still, it scratched. The next day, a second note appeared. Same paper, same block font. On her windshield under the wiper. You're not listening. No signature. He peeled it off with 2 fingers and didn't show her until late. She laughed once, a strange high sound, then folded the note until it became a hard little square. She slid it into the coin pocket of her jeans like a blade. That night, the father changed the Wi-Fi password again and smiled like it was a lesson. The basement door clicked and didn't open. New lock. He tested it twice, a third time for insult. The mother made tea and asked about purity in a tone that implied an answer had already been measured and found light. They nodded, both of them, as if nodding could keep blood moving through a limb cinched with a strap. He checked the exterior cameras from the Porchlight app. One angle, the side yard near the basement window, was tilted a few degrees off. He hadn't touched it. He grabbed a ladder, climbed, and saw that the bracket screw had been loosened and retightened with a different screwdriver head. The metal bore a new cross. Someone knew the hardware. At 11:38 p.m., her phone rang again. She answered on speaker so he could hear it. Breathing, a humid human metronome. Then, a soft sound, like a hinge. Then a click. He said, "Stop calling," too forcefully, cracking his composure. The number was blocked. They reported it to nobody. He stood in the kitchen with the overheads off and the under-cabinet lights painting weak rectangles. He watched the reflection in the window like it was another room. Behind him, the fridge hummed. In front, the dark yard felt like eyes. He whispered her name once, not to summon, but to anchor. The decision formed without debate. Running felt cleaner than being peeled open. They would need money, documents, a plan that didn't rely on borrowed courage. He started searching drawers for cash. She returned to the pantry and stared at the flour again, because fear finds ritual. In the morning, the father announced a new Wi-Fi name, Family First 5G. He said it like a joke and watched their faces for a flinch. The mother locked the basement and put the key in a different place. That night, the burner number texted a time. 3 days. No demand, no explanation. Just the meter starting. Consider the profile. This watcher knew routines, knew the fear thresholds, knew the house well enough to disable one angle and leave the rest pristine. That suggests proximity. The threat wasn't an intruder in the bushes. It was a hand on the thermostat, a finger on the mute button, a presence woven into the schedule. They decided to run. He opened the safe. It didn't open. The code had changed. The first officers stepped into heat and bleach, their boots lifting a shine from tile that shouldn't shine. The house had gone quiet in the wrong way. Appliances hummed like they were trying not to be heard. The camera on the entryway shelf blinked a friendly blue eye that would later turn hostile in court. In the kitchen, a body lay half-folded beside the island, one arm crooked as if reaching for a handle that didn't exist. Blood had fanned under him and then thinned, a shallow tide around rubber soles. The patterning said struggle. The smears said someone stepped there, then corrected, then stepped again. A mug stood half full on the counter, ringed in cooling steam stain, lip print visible in the right light. It waited like a witness with nothing but temperature to offer. Another trail marked the hallway, an interrupted arc leading toward the stairs. The second body lay near the base of the railing, head turned toward the front door as if expecting help to arrive from that angle. The throat wound told a harsher story. Spatter flecked the wall at shoulder height, directional, consistent with a wild counterattack that never landed. On the stair post, a single long hair caught and waved in the draft from the vent, too deliberate to be random in the mind of a detective who has seen coincidence pretend to be fate. One detective paused at the TV in the living room, frozen on a frame of home videos. A backyard, a cake, a child grinning through frosting. The remote had fallen under the coffee table, a red triangle of paws blinking. Someone had tried to rewind the past and stalled. Across the room, family photos had tipped on their hooks, a line of smiling faces angled downward like nodding jurors. They called the time of discovery because the bodies couldn't speak for themselves. Paramedics stopped where protocol told them to stop. The air tasted metallic over the citrus of cleaner, an argument between truth and presentation. A drawer hung open near the knife block, one slot empty. A serrated bread knife remained. The chef's knife didn't. The safe in the office had popped like a rib cage, pried open. The metal curled where a pry bar met impatience. Inside, papers sprawled, insurance forms, a passport sleeve emptied, a velvet ring box pitched into the corner like a long-ago promise. No cash sat in the tray labeled petty. Dust told the story of a recent disturbance. Gloves had been used or hands had been wiped. The prints were partial, smudged, but present where they shouldn't be present, absent where they should. On the kitchen island, a phone buzzed on repeat. Screen locked, contact pinned, a heart emoji next to the sister's first name. Notifications stacked and disappeared. The detective didn't touch it, just read the rhythm. 3 buzzes, pause, 2, pause, as if the pattern could decode intent. Across the floor, an abandoned jacket slumped against a baseboard, dark fabric with darker stains wicking up the fibers. Men's cut. The size matched the adopted son's build reported in the file. A sleeve had a fresh tear where a cuff had caught and ripped. They found a trail of cleaner, a burned rag in the sink, bleach blossom across cotton like frost. The drain stung the eyes. Someone had remembered process mid-panic. Wipe what shines, rinse what tells, miss the edges. The spatter on the underside of the island lip remained. Most people forget to look up when they wipe down. One neighbor had heard a scream. Timing mattered. She told the officer at the curb she'd been pouring dog food when the sound sliced through the quiet. One scream, then another, then a thud that made her think of a ladder falling. She noted the time by the digital clock on her stove, which would later be checked against the power outage that cut and returned, offsetting minutes in ways that defense attorneys love. Still, the frame narrowed. Between the generator clicking on and the siren wailing from 3 blocks out, there were minutes where everything that mattered happened. A body camera caught a locked bedroom door upstairs, the kind with a keyhole polished by decades of anxious fingers. The air held perfume that didn't belong to the woman on the landing. A detective lifted his head, scenting like a dog might, cataloging notes, floral, synthetic, young. The bed had been straightened quickly, the kind of straightening that only looks straight if your heart is beating in your throat. A half glass of water sat on the nightstand, fingerprints misted along its curve. Downstairs, the back door's window had been spidered by a strike, then completed with a fist or a tool. The lock had been turned from the inside before the break. A tell offered itself. The staged break-in didn't understand hinges. A chair lay on its side beneath the frame, legs splayed like it had slipped on a joke. Drawers had been yanked in the office and bedroom, clothing tossed with too much symmetry to be honest chaos. Real burglars don't fold as they rage. They bagged the hair from the stair post. They photographed the jacket. They flagged the missing chef's knife. A detective crouched at the island and measured the cast off, noting angle and distance. Not a tall attacker, or at least not a high point of origin for the strike. Hands shaking leave their own geometry. The lab would later call out medium-velocity spatter inconsistent with an intruder's blitz, more consistent with a domestic eruption escalating to lethal force. In the pantry, a faint scuff near the baseboard matched athletic shoes. The adopted son's team roster photo on the fridge showed brand and tread. They would later lift a partial from a smear in the hall, the cut on his palm explaining why he bled in a shape that spoke of wiping, not of being dragged. Even now, the detective could see the story trying to arrange itself in a way the house would accept. It didn't fit. Houses know. Moving from the scene to the suspect's profile, start with secrecy. Secrecy breeds escalation, especially in a household that confuses control with care. If concealment is the family's second language, then a forbidden relationship is not an outlier. It's a predictable mutation. The motive here isn't just desire. It's the relief of not being watched, pursued by the terror of being caught. Now let's look at the mechanics of the crime. The MO points to intimate knowledge. Power cut before confrontation, generator kicking in like a rehearsed beat, angles chosen where the cameras failed or funneled. That's proximity. That's a perpetrator who knows how the father moves at night, where the mother keeps her phone, which drawer sticks when yanked fast. A stranger can mimic chaos. Only family can reproduce routine. Speaking of motive, forbidden love is the accelerant, not the fire. The fire is shame weaponized by surveillance. If the parents engineered pressure, password changes, locks, moral lectures, then the couple's psychology shifts from thrill to survival. In that shift, violence becomes a fantasy of control, not planned murder in a vacuum, a catastrophic attempt to end the watching. But the real question is, why choose a close-quarters blade? Knives are intimate. They require commitment at arm's length. If the son grabbed the chef's knife, it tracks with panic layered over rage. If the mother's throat wound came during a sprint to stop a call, that reads like an impulsive silencing rather than a premeditated execution. The thing is, intimacy can turn a shove into a fatal arc because distance collapses and adrenaline lies. Consider financial stressors. The pride safe isn't just theft, it's leverage. Hidden debts, insurance policies, the whiff of a college fund turned bargaining chip, all shape behavior. If the father tightened money alongside morality, the pair would feel trapped economically as well as emotionally. Then the safe code changes. The drawer opens empty. That isn't only a closed door. It's a statement. You have no exit, I don't control. People break doors that talk like that. Now, profile the pair, codependent under audit. He trends toward action, hardware, routing, the physical fix. She trends toward performance, alibis, tone, timing. Together, they build a shared reality where their bond justifies risk. Under threat, he will move first. She will follow with a script. That division of labor can keep secrets alive. It also sets up disastrous timing during crisis. One sprints, one speaks, and blood fills the gap. Moving from the scene to the timeline, the father descends with a bat after power fails. That means the power cut wasn't an accident. It was used as provocation or cover. Cutting power buys seconds and blinds surveillance, but it also summons the enforcer. If the son anticipated the father's descent, he chose the kitchen as a choke point. Oil on tile, slippery footing, low light. The environment amplifies error. Everything changed when the first blow missed and the second didn't. Then, the hallway. The mother pivots from protection to alarm. She sees a body, reaches for phone, heads for daughter. The throat wound suggests a desperate intercept on the stairs, the worst outcome of a tug-of-war with a moving blade. The spatter pattern says, close, messy, angled upward, consistent with someone smaller striking up as someone turns away. Not an assassin's cut. A panicked slash to stop a call that was already connecting in her mind. Now, let's address the locked bedroom with perfume still in the air. That room is a bunker, a story incubator, and a trigger all at once. If the daughter hid there, the scent locates her. If she emerged and yelled his name, the call across the stairwell reframed the mother as an obstacle, not a target. In that split second, motive is no longer abstract. It's the urge to keep a bond intact, expressed with metal. Which brings us to the burner. Recurring calls push the pair toward a deadline. Deadlines compress empathy. If the caller is later tied to the father's circle, the motive reframes from greed to enforced confession. Confess or be exposed. Corner an already secretive pair, and they will choose control over confession. Control inside a sealed house looks like staging, wiping, and a bad break-in. Wiping fails because panic misses the underside lip. Staging fails because the lock betrays hinge logic. Lies fail because co-authors forget their commas. Think about this. The mind as a locked box. The parents tried to pick it open with pressure. The kids welded it shut with shared secrets. When those welds held under strain, the only remaining release was force, not rational, human. So, who placed the final blow? The profile suggests he did the stabbing in the kitchen. The cast-off and height align. In the hall, The upward throat cut could be his hand again, eyes burning from cleaner, vision tunneled, lungs flooding. But motive is shared even when contact is singular. If she pulled the bathroom door at the wrong moment, if her shout froze the mother, then her presence shapes the blade's path. Co-offending doesn't always mean co-striking. It means co-creating the moment where a strike becomes inevitable. In the end, the motive stack reads: shame, surveillance, deadline, and a bond defined against the house. Cold calculation appears in the power cut and the safe. Heat explodes in the kitchen and on the stairs. The profile tightens. Proximity over stealth, panic over plan, and a love story that mistook secrecy for safety until the blood made it plain. The parents didn't ask for phones. They asked for dinner. That's how control operates when it wants confession without blood. The table was set with the good plates. Candles flickered for no reason but theater. The father's voice carried that Sunday cadence even on a Tuesday. Grateful for family, grateful for opportunity, grateful for truth. He didn't look at either of them when he said truth. He looked at the roast. The mother served like she was measuring doses. She asked about grades, practice, choir, the weather. Then she set down her fork and said, "We're updating the family medical file." Casual. DNA kits for health markers. The father nodded, chewing, eyes on the son. The girl's breath shortened. The son's knee hit the table and rattled the water. A test dresses as care while reaching for certainty. He smiled, said, "Cool," like a boy with nothing to hide. His voice landed a half-step sharp. The father shifted to logistics. "We'll do them tomorrow. Quick swabs. Insurance covers it." Insurance always covered the things that served the house. The mother followed with a softer blade. "And we've been thinking about options for next semester." A pamphlet slid across the table as if by accident. A school with a stone arch and words like structure and leadership under the photo. "Boarding might focus you," she said to him, eyes still on her plate. He stared at the pamphlet until the letters rearranged into threat. Across the table, the girl's napkin crumpled slowly in her lap. She cleared her throat. "I think someone is messing with me," she said, letting the words hang like steam. The mother tilted her head, patient. "Who?" "A beat." "I don't know," she said, and looked at the son in a way that said, "Help me, or I drown." He swallowed something that wasn't food and said he'd fix it. His voice shook like a cable under load. The father smiled a public smile in a private room. "Good," he said. "We'll all fix it. Together." Together meant the way a vise and a workbench are together. He placed his hand on the table, flat, as if stilling a restless animal. They scheduled a meeting at the church office. Neutral ground that wasn't neutral at all. Thursday, 4 o'clock. The father framed it as guidance. The mother called it covering them with love. The girl looked at the candle and blinked until a tear slid and caught the light. She said yes, like a person agreeing to anesthesia. After dishes, the son found her in the hallway outside the laundry room where whispers go to live. "I'll stop it," he said, and meant the calls, the notes, the pressure, everything with teeth. She shook her head. "You can't stop them." He said he could. He had to. The note in her pocket had become a square brand. At 9:12, his phone lit with the unknown number. Not a call. A text. "Time's up." Then, "A meeting place, the park, midnight. Bring what they owed." No amount had ever been named. That's how leverage works when it isn't about money. He stared at the screen until the letters floated. She read over his shoulder and went cold from collarbone to wrist. The burner established the tempo. Their hearts tried to match and failed. He answered with a single word he hated. "Okay." His finger hovered before sending, then dropped like a hammer. The bubble shifted to delivered. Nothing else came. Silence can be more precise than any demand. Upstairs, the mother knocked on the girl's door and leaned in with a cup of tea she didn't intend her to drink. "You're safe," she said. That sentence only works when it's true. The girl sipped and said nothing. The mother looked at her face for a map she could navigate. Found none. Down the hall, the father lingered in the doorway to the office where the safe yawned with new scars. He kept his back to the hall and spoke like a man praying. "We can do this the easy way," he said softly. "To nobody and to everyone." He set the church calendar on the desk, aligning the boxes with the desk grain. He liked lines. The son went to the garage, palms sweating. He found the bat leaning where the father kept it, clean, grip sticky with resin, a promise of straight answers. He set it back. He wasn't there yet. He checked the breaker box and counted the switches. He checked the generator light and watched its patient green. When people plan to run, they inventory power without admitting why. At 10:27, the burner pinged again. 3 words that stripped the room of air. "Tonight, or everyone knows." He showed her. She looked at the door like it could become a wall. He said they could buy a day. She said there were no days left. He said the park, midnight, cash. She said they had none. He said the safe. She said it wouldn't open. He said then they make it open. A plan rose because refusing a plan felt like suffocation. He would go to the safe, pry what he could. She would keep her mother near, slow any move toward the church schedule, keep phones in sight. If the notes came from inside the house, proximity would reveal the seam. That was the hopeful logic of cornered animals. At 11:03, he texted the burner. "We'll bring it." At 11:05, the reply came, "You have 90 minutes. Deadlines turn people into instruments." The girl's hands shook and then stilled. "If this fails," she whispered, "we tell them." He shook his head. "If we tell them now, they'll own it. They'll own us." She didn't argue because arguing would break the thin skin keeping them from collapse. As the refrigerator motor cycled off, the house felt like it inhaled. He kissed her forehead in the shadow of the pantry door. Not romance, calibration. She closed her eyes for 1 second and saw the church office, the carpet, the chairs with arms designed to cradle confession. She opened them and said, "Okay." A pact is sometimes just 2 people saying the same fear out loud. The ultimatum wasn't the text. It was the family shape closing. That's the thing about pressure. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it taps the glass and smiles. He looked at the clock, at the dark window, at his hands. 90 minutes to buy a future or a cell. He moved. He moved first. Pry bar, screwdriver, a folded towel to muffle metal on metal. The office smelled like old paper and lemon oil, the safe like stubborn breath. He wedged the bar, leaned his weight, felt the give that isn't victory so much as promise. The lip curled. A shriek of metal bit the room. He froze, listened for feet on the stairs. Nothing. He levered again. The door popped a fraction, and then surrendered with a cough. Inside, files and empty trays stared back. Cash had become rumor. He grabbed what would pass, a leather envelope with a thin stack of old bills, a passport sleeve left his taunt, a velvet ring box. He didn't pause to calculate. He needed weight in a bag, the optics of payment. He zipped a hoodie, shoved the haul into an old backpack, wiped the safe's edge with the towel until his palm burned. The generator light hummed outside the house, like a sedated heart. She handled contact. In her mirror, she checked for any tell that said panic. None looked honest enough. She slid into a hoodie, tucked her hair under a cap, and texted the number. "On our way." The reply came as if someone had been staring at the screen. "Bench by the basketball court. Midnight. Alone. Bring everything." It was 11:38. Time sliced thin. Across town, unaware of the danger they carried, a stray cat crossed an empty lot and vanished. That's the scale of coincidence they hoped would cover them. They left through the garage, door rising slow to keep noise low. He killed the headlights until the car cleared the street. Her knee bounced. He set a hand on it and felt her stop only because he'd asked, not because calm had arrived. They took back roads, weaving through quiet cul-de-sacs, where motion detectors blinked awake as if waving. In the park lot, they killed the engine and listened to the tick of cooling metal and their breathing. The bench waited under a sodium lamp that made faces look like secrets. He took the bag. She stayed half a step behind him, eyes on the tree line. A figure, detached from shadow, hood up, gait deliberate, height average, build unremarkable, aura of practiced invisibility. The figure stopped at conversational distance. No greeting. A hand extended. He lifted the bag. The hand took it. The transaction felt like a spell being tested. "Count it," he said, trying to sound like someone with leverage. The hood tilted, then shook once. "Not necessary." The voice was flattened, a geography erased. The figure turned. He said, "Wait." "No, wait." The figure kept moving, cutting across the grass toward the far gate. She grabbed his sleeve. "Don't," she breathed. He pulled free. He followed at a distance that felt brave and then stupid. She came too, because that's what they did, terrible choices in formation. The figure passed the swings, didn't look back, slipped through the gap in the fence by the maintenance shed, and vanished into a corridor of backyard fences. They jogged to the gap and hesitated. The corridor funneled sound and risk. He went in. She went in. Their shoes whispered over packed dirt. At the exit, the figure was already half a block down a cul-de-sac, not running, just choosing angles with confidence. A camera above a garage blinked red. He quickened. The figure slid left between two houses. By the time they reached the corner, there was no one to see. The night swallowed specifics. Failure arrives quietly. He bent over, hands on knees, listening for feet that weren't theirs. She stared at the backpack strap, ghosting his shoulder. "We shouldn't be here," she said, voice small and flat. He straightened, jaw tight. "We got rid of something." It sounded false in his own ears. Back home, the house met them with arranged calm. The kitchen clock blinked at 12:07. He went straight to the office to close the safe door, as if form could erase content. It wouldn't shut. The bend had warped alignment. He pushed anyway until the hinge squealed and accepted the pretense. On the desk, the ring box sat open like a petal. He snapped it closed and flinched at the sound. She hovered at the threshold of the hallway, listening for parents. The house hummed. The mother's door stayed dark. The father's door stayed closed. The silence felt staged. That's when she saw the note on the island, a square of legal pad under the magnet that used to hold family recipes. 2 words. Too late. Her throat tightened. "Did you—" she started. He shook his head. He stepped closer. The handwriting was the same. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. A photo arrived. The backpack unzipped, contents splayed. Her blood went cold at the composition, the leather envelope, the empty passport sleeve, the ring box, arranged on a surface that wasn't the park bench. The counter in the photo had a nick she recognized from years of chopping. It was their kitchen island. He realized too late what that meant. The watcher wasn't at the park. The watcher had been in the house while they performed obedience under a streetlight. He lifted his gaze from the phone to the vent above the pantry and felt the thud of recognition. She covered her mouth. Their staged payment had become inventory for a threat already inside. He texted, "What do you want?" The reply came as if scripted in advance. "Keep playing your parts." And then a second message, "Check under her car." He looked at her. "Keys," he said, and they sprinted to the garage, feet soft, hearts loud. He crouched beside the rear bumper and reached up. His fingers closed on a small box with a magnet and an LED no bigger than a pinhead. A tracker, warm from the drive, stakes doubled, money gone, privacy perforated, pressure now had telemetry. He held the device like it might bite. She backed into the washer, eyes wide, the word please forming and dying without a subject. They'd tried to pay. They'd been taught a harsher lesson. The watch didn't want cash. It wanted control. The tracker sat on the washer like a tooth pulled from a mouth that kept biting. He set it down carefully, as if gentleness could change what it was. She stared at it and said the sentence they'd been circling without touching. We tell them. The word them expanded until it filled the house. Parents, police, church, light, even if it burned. He reached for certainty the way he reached for tools. Not yet. She didn't blink. Then when? The burner hadn't texted again. Silence now sounded like permission to escalate. He knew it. She knew it. The first plan had fed the watcher. The second plan had to starve it. She drafted a letter to her mother on a legal pad stolen from the kitchen drawer. She wrote, "I made mistakes," and crossed it out. She wrote, "Someone is hurting me," and crossed that out too. The thing is, truth felt like a net even before anyone cast it. She tried again. "I am not safe the way we've been doing safe." That stayed. She wrote about pressure, about fear, about the phone calls. She did not write about him. She left his name blank like a wound waiting for air. He read over her shoulder, pencil hovering. He struck lines that sounded like confession without control. "Don't say when," he murmured. "Don't say where." She pulled the pad back, jaw set. Then what's the point? He didn't answer, because the answer was cowardice dressed as caution. They role-played in the laundry room, the dryer a steady drumbeat. He took the father's cadence, clipped and kind. "We love you. Tell us everything." She practiced words that bought time. "Someone is threatening me." He, as father, leaned in. Who? She, as herself, didn't say. Every path ended at exile. Every ending showed him on a curb with a duffel, her at a window with the curtain pulled. The mind runs rehearsals to feel prepared. In crisis, rehearsals only prove how unprepared you are. She opened her voice memos and hit record. "Mom," she said, and her voice thinned. "I'm in trouble. Someone is watching me. I don't know who." She paused, swallowed, started again, calmer. "I need help without punishment." She looked at him as if granting parole. "Say something." He leaned toward the phone and couldn't. His throat locked. The red line crept forward. He pressed stop and deleted the file like it had burned him. They scheduled bravery for breakfast. A conversation at the table, sunlight as witness, coffee's ordinary steam to soften edges. They agreed on anchor phrases. "I'm scared. This is bigger than me. Please listen before you react." They set alarms for early, to catch the house, before it put on its mask. They lay in separate rooms and didn't sleep. At dawn, the father's door opened early. His footsteps angled to the garage. The engine turned, backed out, and left a vacuum. Work or strategy? The mother's door stayed shut, lock engaged, the kind of locked that says, "Not now," without words. The house denied them a stage. Fear doesn't wait for convenient rooms. The burner rang at 7:02, cutting through the clink of bowls and the silence of swallowed plans. Unknown number. He let it vibrate into voicemail. It rang again. He answered on speaker because hiding had run out of legs. The voice was the same flattened geography. "Tonight," it said, "or everyone knows." The call clicked off. No time, no place, just a lid slamming on a pot already boiling. She put both hands on the counter to steady the tremor. "We tell the police," she said. He pictured uniforms walking through last night, through the kitchen, through the hall. He pictured bags, labels, chains of custody leading to chains of another kind. "We can't tell them now," he said, voice low. "Everything looks wrong." He meant guilty. She looked like someone 2 steps from the ledge, not because she wanted down, but because the crowd behind her kept pushing. "Then we tell her," she said, meaning the mother. "Not details. Enough to get help." He nodded, then shook his head, his own contradiction making him dizzy. If your mom knows, your dad knows in an hour. Then church, then school, then the world. He hated how strategic he sounded. Strategy had gotten them here. The house interrupted them. The generator test kicked for 3 seconds and died, a hiccup of power that reset the stove clock. 12-cent flashed, fresh and insistent. He stared at the blinking numbers and saw a metronome for panic. She opened the fridge and closed it again without taking anything, hunger irrelevant in a body flooded with cortisol. They tried teachers in their heads, a counselor, a youth leader. Every adult felt like a doorway into the same hallway. He said, "What about your aunt?" She said, "She tells my mom everything." He said, "The clinic?" She said, "They'll call home." They pinged off options like bats blind in daylight. He wrote a text to the mother instead of speaking. "Can we talk after school about something important?" "Not an emergency." She read it, adjusted the words like they were dials, softened and sharpened until they felt like a key that might fit. He hit send, the dots appeared, then vanished. The response came 3 minutes later. "Of course. Proud of you for asking." His stomach turned at proud. At noon, he stepped into a restroom stall at school and recorded his own memo, a method without audience. "If anything happens," he whispered, "check the vents, the tracker under the car, the burner messages. We were being pushed." He saved it under a fake class name and set the file to hidden. Insurance against a future with handcuffs. After last period, the mother texted, "Running late. We'll talk tonight." He felt the trap reset. Tonight belonged to the burner now. The house, unintentionally or not, had deferred them into a collision. They met in the parking lot, the sun too bright for the day they were having. She said, "We can still tell her first." He looked at the time, at the hollow in her cheeks, at the steady line of his fear. "We tell her," he said, "after we make the call stop." It was backward. It was the only forward they could force. As they turned toward home, his phone buzzed once. A photo again. The upstairs hallway shot from a low angle, their bedroom doors in frame. The caption, "Be on time." Their confession strategy didn't disappear. It delayed, and delay under pressure is just another word for surrender dressed as hope. As the door closed behind her, he said the thing that changes cases, not feelings. "We flip it." She frowned. "How?" He tapped the tracker with his knuckle. "We don't just find the watcher. We make the watcher find a crime that points away from us. Now let's look at the mechanics of the frame." He needed a lure the watcher couldn't resist, a promise of evidence outside the house. He opened his laptop, killed Wi-Fi, and loaded a USB with the photos the burner had sent, plus a new folder named Insurance. Inside, copies of their blandest texts, a screenshot of a dummy note that read, "I know what you did." He scrubbed metadata, randomized file names, and dropped in a PDF labeled camera map. It showed a fake diagram of hidden devices and a made-up password to a non-existent cloud account. He wanted the watcher to chase ghosts. But the real question is, where do you plant bait so a hunter steps into light? He chose the neighbor with the door camera angled too wide, a mailbox mouth always open, always watching. He said, "We stash this. Anonymous tip that the watcher lives there." She pinched the bridge of her nose. What if the neighbor finds it first? He looked at the USB like it could swear loyalty. Then it lands with police and muddies the pool. They prepped alibis to pair with bait. She would FaceTime a friend at the exact time of the drop, cheerful, visible, calendar pinned behind her like testimony. He would jog the cul-de-sac in a bright hoodie, headlamp on, a moving flag in a corridor of cameras. If anyone looked, They'd see fitness, not furtive. At 9:42 p.m., his shoes hit pavement. He looped the block twice, heart knocking at a rhythm he couldn't slow. On the third pass, he cut across grass, crouched at the neighbor's mailbox, and slid the USB into a pile of glossy coupons. A sensor above the door blinked red. He told himself that was fine. Transparency can be its own camouflage if you provide a reason for being seen. He turned to go and caught his reflection in the storm door glass, face tight, jaw set. He forced a yawn and a stretch, the actor remembering his blocking. He moved. Across town, unaware that their image would soon matter, a cashier counted drawers. That's the scale of coincidence again. He rejoined her in the kitchen. The FaceTime call still hummed, friend's voice a babble of homework dramas. She ended with a flourish of fake laughter and a promise to text notes. He nodded at her phone like a coach. Then, his phone thumped. A text, the burner, a video clip, grainy, low angle, their kitchen. A figure moving through at 9:50, hood up, gloved hand, brushing the island. Not him. Not her. He scrubbed the clip frame by frame, breath held. The figure paused by the vent, adjusted something, turned, and in that pivot, the profile caught a sliver of light. Not enough for a face, just enough for a posture. Familiar. He realized too late what that posture meant, authority posing as caution. The watcher wasn't simply inside. The watcher believed they were entitled to be there. He whispered, "They're in now." She stared at the vent like it had grown teeth. He typed back, "Cameras are mapped. We can see you." The reply arrived instantly. "Can you?" He checked the office. The air purifier hummed, a mild, friendly sound. He unscrewed the front grate and found nothing but filters and dust. He set it down and felt stupid, then angry, then cold. Anger without a target turns tactical. He pivoted. "We can still make the neighbor look like the hub." She didn't answer. She was staring at the church pamphlet on the counter as if the embossed stone arch were a trap door. At 10:11, a message pinged from a new number, a link to a private file share. He didn't click. He mirrored the link into a sandbox on his laptop and watched for pings. An IP bounced through layers, then flared near a cell tower they drove past twice a day. Proximity again. He copied the link onto a second USB and wrote, "Watcher Cloud," in a bold hand. He sealed it in a snack bag and tucked it under the neighbor's mailbox lid. A second lure, a promise of access that would pull eyes outward. Unexpected complication. A porch light snapped on. "Hey!" a voice called, window sliding up. He froze, bag halfway deposited. The camera caught his turned face in perfect profile. He dropped the lid and jogged off, waving a sorry that sounded like it belonged to a teenager. Breaking curfew. He rounded the hedge and doubled over, hands on thighs, lungs burning. Exposure had arrived through the front door. Back inside, her phone buzzed. A new clip from inside their kitchen, this time with sound. A whisper. "Please don't." Not hers, not his. The mother, weeks ago, or tonight? The timeline blurred under fear. She clutched the counter. "They're going to win," she said, flat. He hardened. "No, they're going to make mistakes." He checked vents room by room. In the office, he felt a draft that didn't match the register. He unscrewed a narrow return and saw a pinhole lens nested like a tick against duct metal. He didn't touch it, and he followed the wire to a hole bored cleanly through drywall into the closet behind. Inside, a small black box blinking green tucked behind a stack of hymnals. He stared. The hymnals weren't theirs. He had no choice but to trace the wire with gloves on and snap a single photo. Proof without alert. He tucked the vent back, heart loud enough to feel in his teeth. He whispered, "They're recording to a cloud we can't see, but the router knows paths." He opened admin, eyes scanning logs, a recurring connection to an encrypted address ending in a domain that looked like a church vendor. He laughed once, no humor in it. He copied the string into the USB folder named Camera Map. Chekhov's gun loaded. At 10:49, the neighbor texted his father. Community thread. A photo still of a jogger crouched by a mailbox. Caption, "All good? Teen doing laps?" The father didn't reply. The father didn't need to. The image would live in a circle that made every next step heavier. She pressed her back to the wall and slid down to the tile. "We can't keep up," she said. He crouched and took her hands, cold and damp. "We don't have to keep up. We have to break tempo." He held up the last USB. "If they bite this, the police chase a neighbor. If they don't bite, we learn what they fear." Which brings us to the turn. The watcher replied with a single image, his crouched profile beside the mailbox frozen under porch light. Caption, "Cute." Then, a second photo, closer, sharper, their kitchen, island, the ring box open again. Caption, "Try again." Everything changed when he realized the watcher wanted them to know the frame had failed, not just control. Humiliation is pressure. He set the USB down like a weapon that had misfired. She looked at the clock. 11:03. Time kept moving. The truth was worse. The watcher had access at home and reach into the neighborhood. Bait would not save them. It had only narrowed the hunt. He stood, steadied. "Then we stopped playing their game." She nodded without hope, which is sometimes agreement in its purest form. He checked the vents one more time, and that's where he found the pinhole lens. Bus tickets are choices made in ink. She bought 2 at a kiosk that didn't ask questions. Cash in, paper out, destination far enough to feel like a different alphabet. She folded them into the liner of her jacket, a secret sewn by shaking hands. He met her at the stop behind the pharmacy, breath showing in little puffs that looked like lies leaving the body. She insisted. "We disappear." The word didn't echo. It landed dull. He nodded because he had run out of alternative verbs. In his pocket, a folding knife sat heavy. "For safety," he'd told himself at the store, as if metal could ward off a cloud. She slipped a small orange bottle into her sleeve. "For the panic," she said, not saying whose. They walked back once more because people always orbit the scene of their collapse. She wrote a note in block letters on lined paper, deliberate, slow. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't do this your way anymore. Please don't look for me." The handwriting looked like the fridge notes, and that irony didn't miss her. She left it on the dresser, under a framed photo of a day that had turned false in retrospect. As the door closed behind her, a key turned downstairs. The father was home early, footsteps a metronome of policy. He intercepted the tickets in the mudroom with the same efficiency he used on spreadsheets. A glance, a reach, possession. "What's this?" Not a question. Inventory. He positioned himself in the garage like a gate, bat leaned against the workbench, voice calm in the way that makes people rage or break. "We don't run from family." He called for a conversation and got combustion. The son's jaw clenched. The daughter's eyes found corners. The father's hands were open, palms up, but the room read fists. He said words like guidance and accountability, each landing like a nail. When he said church office, the son's chest tightened. When he said purity, something inside the daughter snapped so quietly it could have been a breath. Everything changed when the father's open hand became a slap. Not hard, precise, authority condensed. The crack made the tools on the pegboard shiver. The son's head snapped sideways, then forward, heat blooming behind his ear. The father looked immediately sorry, and even that stoked a darker current. Pity as control. The son shoved, not a throw, a refusal. A wrench clattered to the floor, skittering to a stop with its open jaw aimed like a threat. All 3 of them froze and saw the rest of their lives hanging from a peg. The mother entered on the echo. She saw the reddening cheek, the wrench at rest, the boy with a knife he hadn't realized he'd palmed, the girl with tickets half visible from a pocket. She went white and chose the only lever she still believed in. "We're calling the police." Not a bluff, a sacrament. She reached for her phone. The son's airway closed. The daughter whispered, "Please," and nobody knew who she was talking to. He begged for an hour. She cried and said it was her fault. The father shut the basement door and pocketed his phone with the same motion, lock, and device disappearing into control. The mother took the daughter by the wrist, gentler than she felt, and steered her upstairs. "You're safe now." The daughter looked back over her shoulder at the boy like she was trying to memorize him in a burning room. He raided the tool drawers because hands need work when minds spiral. He found a flat bar and a wire cutter. He pried a window until the alarm chirped a warning that felt like an accusation. He swore under his breath, fingers slick. He had no choice but to kill the sound. He stepped to the panel, yanked the cover, and cut power to the house in a single reckless snip. Lights died. The refrigerator sighed into silence. In the dark, his own pulse got louder than the threat. The generator clicked and hummed, emergency lights tinting the hall into hospital colors. Footsteps hit the stairs above him, heavy, deliberate. The father coming down, bat in his right hand, voice measured in a space built for shouting. "Put it down!" The son crouched by the island, hand tight on the knife he told himself was for safety. He didn't want to fight. He wanted escape. But the kitchen was a funnel, and the father filled it. Tension has geometry. Father blocking exit, son wedged by island. Failure meant arrest, exposure, the end of the only bond that had felt like air. The bat swung to corral, not to crush, and still it looked like a verdict. The son moved left. The father mirrored. Oil from an earlier pan slicked the tile under a heel. Gravity offered its cold counsel. The bat clanged against the island and dropped. The knife flashed upward on instinct and fear, finding ribs because proximity reduces options to a point. The father's breath left, then sound returned as a wet gargle that would become evidence. Silence didn't arrive. It retreated. The son stared at his hands, at metal shining in emergency light, at red that looked black. He wanted to rewind to a kiosk, to a note on a dresser, to a slap that had felt like a line in chalk. He called her name with a voice not built for blood. Upstairs, a door opened. A shadow moved across the railing, and the mother saw the floor and made a choice. She ran toward the daughter and away from the truth she couldn't stop. The church office was gone now. The story had crossed its line. He begged for an hour like a man asking a tide to pause. 60 minutes, he said, hands up, knife low, voice thin. "We can fix this." She answered from the top of the stairs, eyes wet, voice shaking. "It's my fault." That line wasn't strategy. It was reflex shaped by years of praise and threat. Downstairs, breath turned to math, seconds into choices, choices into evidence. The father lay where he fell, chest moving in a stagger that counted down. The son pressed a towel to the wound because the body asks for decency even when the mind can't define it. He felt the heat, the slick, the uselessness. "Stay with me," he said. The father's eyes flicked to the ceiling like a man checking exits. He tried to speak and found the bat instead, fingers failing over resin grip. A sound left him, a grunt that meant hold, that meant stop, that meant nothing actionable. The son folded the towel tighter and knew it was theater. The mother moved with purpose, honed by 1,000 ordinary emergencies. She took the daughter's wrist. "Upstairs," she said. "Bathroom. Lock it." Commanding calm, the girl's steps were small and obedient, until the hallway bent and memory snapped. She planted her heels. "No," she said, voice brittle. "We can't leave him." The mother leaned in, eyes soft, mouth hard. "You're safe now." The promise bounced off a wall it had hit before. He needed time, not comfort. He reached for it with his hands. He pulled open kitchen drawers, found rolls of paper towels, bleach, gloves. "Go," he called up. "Now." The girl wrote something on her face, obedience, and went with the mother because choice had narrowed to a single line. The bathroom door shut. The lock turned. Water ran, not for washing, for noise. That's a habit you learn in surveillance houses. The basement door shut with a decisive click, a boundary the father had loved. The son stared at it like a debt collector. He moved to the alarm panel. The display blinked into darkness. He'd already killed the power. He pulled the cover anyway and stared at numbers that wouldn't glow. Control felt like a hallway with doors all closed. He needed a new door. He looked at the back window. He staged the break-in because stories require props. He grabbed a chair and threw it. The glass cracked, then spidered, then yielded. The sound sharp and stupid in the generator lit quiet. He reached through and twisted the already unlocked latch, understanding too late that hinges tell truth even when you beg them for lies. He didn't fix it. He escalated. He tossed drawers. He overturned a lamp. He scattered cushions with symmetry he couldn't help. The living room looked like a set. Professionals would notice. Upstairs, the mother's voice threaded through a bathroom door. "Stay here?" The daughter's breath answered in short little bursts. She caught her reflection in the mirror, a stranger with wet eyes, and pocketed the orange bottle from earlier because panic hadn't left. She pressed her ear to the door and heard metal move, heard the scrape of a chair, heard the sound a house makes when it is being rewritten. He ran water in the sink to rinse blood from his hands, then stopped and thought. Running water leaves trace. He turned the tap off, grabbed a rag, poured bleach until his eyes stung. He wiped counters. He wiped the island lip after remembering what panic forgets. He missed the underside again because the body hates crawling while the head screams move. He wiped the handle of the knife drawer. He wiped the drawer pulls, the fridge door, the oven's edge. Bleach bloomed in his nose until memory blurred. A neighbor texted the mother, "Need help?" Because lights flicking and generator hum and a shout carry across lawns like invitations. The mother saw the screen flash and didn't answer. She slid the phone into her pocket and heard the siren in her head before it ever sounded in the street. She pictured uniforms stepping on her clean floors. She pictured a story she could survive. She pictured telling it with her daughter beside her. She put her palm flat to the door. "Don't open for anyone," she said. The girl whispered, "Even you?" The pause that followed would later be used as a weapon. "Even me," the mother said, and stepped away. He had no choice but to kill the alarm's final habits. He moved to the breaker, flipped switches until the generator coughed, and then settled. The house fell into a half-light, unnatural and surgical. He stood in it and realized he still hadn't called for help. The calculus roared, call and confess, wait and stage. He dialed, then ended before it rang. He dialed again, thumb hovering. He had to choose which version of himself would speak. Footsteps on the stairs. The mother had left the bathroom door and come down, phone in hand, face set to a thing he had never been able to stop by pleasing. She saw the towel, the blood, the boy with the red hands, the broken window with the wrong story, the house holding its breath. Her mouth worked around a sentence and found only a name. She ran for him, not to him, to the phone, to the daughter. He saw the path like a diagram. He intercepted. "Please," he said, voice raw. "Stop!" She moved left. He moved with her. She grabbed a bottle on the counter and sprayed it in a panicked arc. Cleaner burned his eyes. He blinked tears that weren't. "Please," she said back and went for the stairs. He reached. The knife was a line between then and after. It swung because fear does. It found soft because anatomy does. A sound happened that never leaves a wall. She fell against the rail and slid, hands to the wound like a person trying to hold in weather. The girl opened the bathroom door on the sound of her name and saw red where there should be blue. She yelled his name like a bridge too late to walk. He caught the mother as she crumpled, lowered her to tile in a mercy that would be read as calculation. He stared at the daughter's face and felt every exit close. The siren finally arrived, faint and far. He turned from grief to procedure because bodies ask for purpose. He vomited in the sink and kept moving. He wiped what he could. He threw open a drawer and emptied it because randomness reads as intrusion. He took the tracker from the washer and smashed it with the wrench that had sung in the garage. He pocketed the pieces. He kicked the bat under the couch so it would be found late, suggestive and wrong. She bandaged his hand with shaking competence, wrap and tape, pressure and knot. "We run now," she whispered. He shook his head, eyes red from chemical and crying. "We finish it," he said, meaning staging, meaning story, meaning the kind of control that pretends to be safety. They moved in concert, two people building a version they could survive for 5 minutes longer than truth would allow. Headlights swept the window. Neighbors stepped out. He stood still as a thief in a gallery. The house listened and kept the secrets it could, which were fewer than the ones they needed. Generator clicks once, then settles into a low hum that flattens color. The kitchen shrinks to angles and edges. Oil freckles shine on tile like a map you don't want to read. He's crouched behind the island, one knee down, one foot braced, knife low, hand wrapped in a fresh bandage she tied tight enough to throb. Breath in fives, eyes sting from cleaner, ears tuned to stares. Father's tread descends with measured weight, each step a sentence, order restored, order enforced. The bat taps the rail on the penultimate riser. He turns into the kitchen halo of emergency light and pauses, head tilting to adjust to the half-dark. "Put it down," he says, not loud, not soft. Pronouncement, not plea. He shifts the bat to his left hand as if to signal restraint. The right hand opens, palm out. Negotiation posed like prayer. Tension clarifies. He wants escape. Father blocks exits, the hall with his shoulder, the back door with his angle. Failure means police at the door, confession scripted by someone else's mouth. Above them, water runs behind a closed bathroom door, a faucet that pretends to be weather. He edges left, testing space. The bat follows. "We can fix this," he tries. The words sound like paper and water. Father's eyes track movement, not message. He advances one step, planting feet on dry tile. "Stop," he says, and means it. The generator hum keeps time. A drip from the island lip lands with a blunt tick. Somewhere, the fridge compressor shudders as if deciding whether to help. He debates reaching for the towel by the sink, a prop for first aid, a lie with cotton. He doesn't move. Action detonates without warning. Father feints right to cut off the hall. He bolts left toward the narrow slot between island and wall. Bat arcs, not for skull, for shoulder, to pin, to herd. Steel skims laminate with a bark. He ducks, knife flashing in an accidental flourish. Shoe hits oil. Traction dissolves. Gravity joins the scene with cold hands. They skid into each other's momentum. The bat clatters, ricochets, slides under the stool. Father's hip clips the island corner. He grunts, recoverable, trained to take impact and keep moving. Son's palm slaps tile, bandage soaking through, a streak the lab will later name arterial smear, and he will just call a mistake. He pushes up fast, blade up, eyes shutting against chemical burn. Father reorients, stance wide, bat at his ankle. His right hand finds counter edge. He steadies. The turn arrives in a gap, the length of a breath. He moves to squeeze past, shoulder to apron hook, knife chest high because no one thinks to lower a blade when time collapses. Father steps into him to halt the exit. The blade finds ribs because ribs are what is there. Not a thrust, a collision sharpened by steel. Contact is dull at first, then heat, then pullback resistance that tells him reality has shifted and will not shift back. Father inhales like a man dropped into cold, then can't find the rest of the breath. Sound becomes a wet rattle. He looks at the boy with something that might be shock, might be anger, might be calculation bleeding into confession. This is happening. His hand goes to the wound and comes away black in generator light. He stumbles a half step, knees remembering a younger man's balance and then forgetting. He sits against the island like he meant to, then slides until the floor accepts him. Silence tries to rush in and gets strangled by the hum. He stares at his hands, both, as if they are foreign instruments. The knife looks smaller now, not because it is, but because of what it holds. He wants to drop it and can't make the command transmit to fingers. He says, "Dad," without deciding to say it. The word lands uselessly between them and breaks. He kneels, a reflex older than all their fights. "Stay with me," he says, because that's what people in movies say when language fails. He presses a dish towel to the wound. It darkens with remarkable speed, a spreading geometry beyond his math. Father's eyes sharpen for a second, as if arriving back to the room. He lifts a hand toward the bat, then halfway changes course to the boy's wrist and stops, fingers hovering, shaking, a near touch that records his print in memory, not powder. He thinks to call 911 and actually pulls the phone before remembering the staging world he just built. The screen throws a pale flare over counters and choices. He sees sirens at the door, questions he cannot answer without detonating all remaining ground. He sets the phone down, then picks it up, then sets it down again. Indecision splinters into noises, sink drip ticking faster, generator hitching, father's breath shortening on a metronome that malfunctions. He calls her name, a small sound that binds 2 floors. Upstairs, a hinge sighs. Mother's shadow crosses the top rail, larger than life in the half-light. She takes in the scene like a photograph moving under red fluid. Boy, towel, red, bat, window. The question on her face isn't who. It's how to stop everything within the laws of a house that just failed its people. She moves, he flinches, the night tightens. The island lip gleams with a smear he missed. The bat hums under the stool like a warning. He hears sirens far, imaginary or real, he cannot tell. He wants to rewind an hour, and also 5 years. He wants to be in the car in the dark behind the pool telling the truth to someone who could carry it without turning it into instruction. Father's hand slides off the towel. A small sound leaves him, not word, but insistence. The boy's chest compresses around a hot ache that feels like consequence. He leans his forehead to the cool cabinet door and bites back a noise that would not help. Then he stands because standing is next, because motion feels like control even when it isn't, and turns toward the stairs where the second sequence waits with its own arithmetic. Mother sees the body as a final exam she didn't study for. Her phone lifts, her mouth opens, and the daughter in the hallway pivots toward the bathroom like muscle memory. "Lock it," Mother says, already thumbing 9. The daughter obeys because obedience is the last rope in a flood. She orders through air, "Stay there! Don't open!" And the call rings once in her ear before she sprints. He understands the geometry instantly. She reaches the landing, she reaches the daughter, she reaches a signal that brings uniforms to this island of half-wiped truth. The thing is, he doesn't want violence. He wants the sound to stop. Tension mounts fast. He needs to stop the call. She's halfway up the stairs, distance converting seconds into a sentence he can't bear. Failure equals prison. Failure equals separation carved in legal stone. His eyes burn. His lungs miscount. Action is a sprint built on fear. He moves, feet slapping, knife low, voice cracking on pleas. She doesn't turn. Her thumb hovers over the final 1. Cleaner from the counter rides the air from downstairs. He reaches the newel, stumbles, grabs rail, pushes up. She pivots on the landing, lifts a spray bottle left on a step from some other domestic project, and blasts his eyes in a fog of chemicals and lemon. It stings like punishment. He blurts, "Stop," blind to angles. Turn happens in a tangle of noise. The bathroom door cracks an inch, and the daughter's voice threads out, "Wait!" a plea that pulls everyone off true lines. Mother slips on wet tile at the landing edge, heels skidding, shoulders swinging to keep balance, phone wobbling to the rail with a hollow knock. He reaches reflexively, not for harm, but to steady, knife uncooperative in a hand trained for utility, not mercy. The arc is small, the result is not. A throat opens because soft tissue meets sharpened steel at bad speed. Sound isn't a scream, it's a guttered exhale. Red blooms across painted balusters in a scatter pattern that will later read as up angle, close contact. She clutches at air, and then at him, and then at nothing. "Please," she whispers, 2 syllables that mean stop time. He tries to catch her weight and only manages to slow the slide. Knife arcs again by accident of grip, not intent, then jerks away like it understood before he did. He drops it. It clinks hard, then rattles down 2 steps and stills with the point aimed at a baseboard, guilty and inert. The daughter pulls the door wider and sees her mother sinking, hands useless against a wound. No hand can hold closed. She says his name like an oath and a question. He kneels, presses the towel he didn't have to spare, hands slick, eyes streaming chemical tears. "Hold it," he begs the daughter, and she does, trembling, fingers whitening with pressure she can't maintain. Her breath hitches, her face goes smooth, the mask people wear when the world asks too much. He fumbles for the fallen phone, screen spidered, number half dialed, emergency symbol bright. He stares at it like it could explain a path that saves all 3, then sets it down because the wrong story already lives in this room. Siren wails faintly, a memory from a moment ago becoming present. The daughter grabs his wrist, trembling so hard it reads like a quake. "You can't leave me," she says, not loud. It lands like a chain. He nods too fast, nods like a man who doesn't know how to stop nodding. "I'm here! I'm here!" He isn't. He's 3 feet down the hall, thinking about bleach and hinges and a window staged backwards. He moves because moving feels like penance. He wipes the rail where her hand smeared, misses the underside because panic still edits his reach. He grabs the knife with a towel and slides it into the kitchen drawer where knives pretend to be unused. He wipes the handle and forgets the lip inside. He lifts the phone again, opens a new call, hesitates, hears the siren closer, ends it, hovers between confess and compose. The siren decides. Mother's eyes glaze in little steps, awareness flickering like a dying bulb. She finds the daughter's gaze and holds it. Whatever she wants to say becomes breath without shape. The daughter says, "It's okay," knowing it isn't, saying it anyway, the way people load words with mercy that can't change physics. The towel soaks through and warms her hands. She doesn't drop it. Her mouth forms a prayer without meanness. He staggers down 2 steps, then back up, undecided, a pinball between outcomes. He checks the bathroom for prints, the faucet for drips, the mat for tracks. He hears feet outside, neighbors gathering, porch lights tick-clicking on. He whispers, "We were too late," without context, and the daughter nods like he's said something useful. Everything is calculation until it snaps. He reaches for her shoulder, steadying her crouch at the throat she can't save. "When they come," he says, "you say you heard a crash and you ran." She blinks. "What do you say?" He swallows. "I say the same." The siren swells, tires grind, a door bangs, boots hit steps like a verdict. He takes one last stupid action because habit tells him to hide the tracker's shards. He shoves them deeper into his pocket like pocket depth matters. He stands as the first fist hammers the front door, and a voice yells, "Police!" And the house inhales for the last time before it becomes a scene. The daughter doesn't let go of his wrist until that word lands. Then she does, because letting go is what the scene requires. They barricade the door with a chair because motion feels like spine. His stomach folds and rejects everything. He leans over the sink and empties himself, bile sharp, breath stuttering. She pulls him back by the wrist and wraps his bleeding hand again with gauze torn from a first aid kit. Tighter this time. Tape hissing. "Look at me," she says, and he can't. "Look at me." He lifts his head, her eyes lock his. "We run now." He shakes his head, swallows acid. "We finish it." The word finish sounds obscene in this room, but he pushes through. The story, the break-in, the timing. She flinches at timing like it's a slap. Outside, voices thicken, neighbors murmuring, headlights skimming walls. He points to the back door. Glass goes out, not in. He kicks a shard outward into the flower bed. It tink-tinks into mulch, cheap music for a funeral. Tension is simple. He wants to protect her. Sirens are close. If police separate them, the house tells its own version, and neither of them survives it intact. He hammers at details that might carry weight. "Smear the frame," he says, eyes red, voice gone to gravel. Not just the latch. She moves with him because she always has. They rub the sill with a dirty rag, wipe prints off with bleach, then dab fingerprints back with gloved fingertips to imply intrusion. Sloppy. True to panic. He drags a drawer out and dumps its contents in a spiral. She stamps on the rug with the wrong shoes to seed confusion. Her mother's flats on his feet, his sneakers on her hands, pressing tread into fibers like a mad person's logic puzzle. "Enough," she breathes. He nods, stops, then starts again, flicking 2 family photos face down because grief will read as chaos if they give it angles. Turn lands on a small, private theft. She sees the locket at her mother's throat, now askew, chain sticky. She hesitates, then lifts it free and pockets it with a tremor she will never forget. He sees and says nothing. What can he say? That's a relic, a mercy, a wrong thing in a long list. He wipes the knife drawer handle with the last clean square of the rag, then curses when he realizes the interior lip still holds a fine crescent of prints. He scrubs with the edge of his shirt until threads give. They agree on story with the speed of people who have rehearsed disasters. "We heard glass," he says. "You locked the bathroom. I went down." She nods. "I saw a figure." He nods. "I heard shouting." They walk the lines back and forth, sanding off corners that might catch. "Don't guess," he warns, voice small. If they ask time, say, "I don't know." She echoes it like catechism. "I don't know." Headlights rake the window. A neighbor calls their names from the porch they grew up waving at. He wants to answer and can't risk it. "Breathe," she says. And they do, shallow and fast, a duet of survival. He glances at his hand. Blood has pushed through tape. She tears it off and reties, tighter still, fingers expert and shaking. "They'll see this," she says. He shrugs a lie. "I cut it on glass." Sirens swell into a single blue smear across cabinets. He opens a new wound in the story because the old one bleeds too much. He tosses a cheap watch onto the floor near the broken door, an old find from the junk drawer, to suggest a skittish thief. He hates himself while doing it. The watch lands face up, dead battery stuck at 2:14, a wrong time the defense will try and fail to weaponize. They pull the chair from the front door and step back, palms open, faces arranged in fear they don't have to fake. He whispers, "Whatever happens, we stay the same. We don't point. We don't break." She nods, eyes glassy. "We," she says. And the word is a fragile bridge. A fist booms against the wood. "Police, open up!" He staggers, breath catches. "Ready?" he asks. She closes her hand around his bandaged wrist, squeezes until he feels bone. "Ready." He opens the door into bleached light. Commands fill the air like hail. "Hands! Now!" They comply, eyes wide, bodies small. The hall behind them looks staged even when you don't know the word. Officers flow past, weapons at low ready, training converting their living room into a diagram. A neighbor gasps. A paramedic hurries toward the stairs on instinct that came too late. He and she are pulled apart by gloved hands as easily as magnets when a sheet of plastic slides between. He catches her eye over her shoulder and shakes his head once, slow. No more words. She nods, lips pressed white. "An intruder," she says to the nearest uniform, voice cracking on the last syllable. He echoes from 3 feet away. I tried to stop him, and coughs like the line is trying to climb back out. A detective appears with a calm that makes everything louder. "Names," she says. They offer them like currency that's already been spent. The detective clocks the bandage, the bleach bloom, the broken window facing the wrong way. She also clocks the way their shoulders curve toward each other even under separation. In her head, the profile tightens. Out loud, she says, "Sit." They sit. The house, now a scene, exhales the last of what it can hold. In the space between their 2 chairs, a pact hardens, invisible and steel-thin. We tell the same story until it holds, or we break together. Fluorescents hum. 2 rooms, 2 chairs, 2 cups of water placed like props. They separate them fast because co-authors write cleaner when they can't see each other. He goes stone cold, she goes soft. That's not performance, that's survival strategy polished by years of managing adults. Detective takes the first pass with him. Simple cadence. Start from the beginning. He fixes his stare on a corner seam of acoustic tile. Heard glass. Went down. Someone was here. Tone flat, affect restrained, the profile of a boy who learned early that stillness looks like innocence. Detective nods as if the rhythm makes sense. "What time?" He blinks slowly. "I don't know." The phrase lands as planned, useful in its emptiness. Across the hall, another detective leans forward with her, voice warm enough to invite. "You can breathe." She nods, shoulders trembling like a curtain in a draft. "I was upstairs. Mom said bathroom. I locked it." She lets a tear fall at a natural beat. The thing is, tears aren't a guarantee of belief, but they slow the tempo. "Did you see him?" the detective asks. She inhales. "A shape," she says. It's a truth-adjacent word that suggests fear without detail. "What kind of shape?" "Tall," she says, which could be anyone and nobody. Minute-by-minute comparisons start. "When did the power cut?" He. "I don't know." She. "After we heard the window." "When did you call?" He. "I tried. It rang. I panicked." She. "She was dialing when—" And the word dissolves. Silence fits better than a noun. They let it stand. Micro-inconsistencies begin to glint. An officer drops a photo on his table, shoe prints by the back door. "These are small," the officer says. He shifts. "I don't know." It covers more than time. "Your hand," the detective adds, eyes on the bandage. "Glass," he answers. The tone is almost bored. "What glass?" He doesn't look at the photo of shards pushed outward. "Back door," he says, then adds, "I think," like a hedge, he hopes reads as trauma. In her room, the detective notes the wall clock behind the interviewer's shoulder. "What did you hear after the crash?" She swallows. "Shouting? Words?" No. "Angry or scared?" She hesitates just long enough. "Scared." The detective writes scared with a small underline. "Your eyes," she says. "They're irritated." "Cleaner," the girl whispers. "He sprayed it?" "No, it was in the air." The detective tilts her head. "Where were you when your mother fell?" The girl's breath snags. "In the doorway." "Doorway to the bathroom?" A nod. The detective notes the angle that makes the blood spatter pattern unlikely from that position. Now let's look at timing. Detectives like clocks, More than stories. They ping the oven display reset by the generator. They compare to a neighbor's porch camera. He claims 12:07 for the crash because that's when the kitchen clock blinked wrong. They have 12:11 for motion at the back door and 12:13 for voices raised. Explain the gap, the detective says. He's ready. I froze. It's plausible. It's also convenient. But the real question is motive. The detective doesn't say affair. She says, has there been pressure at home about rules? He looks at her like she said the weather. It's strict, she nods. Any reason your father would be in the kitchen with a bat? He lifts a shoulder. He heard the alarm. Across the hall, the detective asks the girl, anyone threatening you? She exhales, eyes flicking to a corner. Anonymous messages. It's the first shared truth they allow. From who? I don't know. Can we see? She hands over a phone that's been cleaned enough to look authentic and messy enough to look honest. Everything changes when a tech pops into each room with a sealed bag. Pinhole camera pulled from a vent. The detective watches his pupils give the smallest tell. This look familiar? He shakes his head too fast. The detective slides the bag closer. Someone put eyes in your house. He nods. We felt watched. The detective doesn't push the pronoun. Who had access? My dad, he says, then corrects. My parents, then adds, we all did, because too much specificity is a cliff. In her room, the tech lays down stills from the hidden cam. Stairwell, kitchen entry, partial faces, grain and angles that accuse without names. The audio sheet lists timestamps, a thin waveform with a single marked whisper. Please don't. That's her, the girl says, voice breaking in the right place. She covers her mouth. The detective watches grief and catalogues cadence. Tell me about your relationship with him, the detective says, meaning the boy. She answers with air. He's my brother, she manages, which is both true and a lie. Which is why it lands strange in the room. They tighten the profile. Codependent pair under stress, the detective murmurs to her partner through glass. One sprints, one scripts. Back inside, the questions sharpen. Why was the safe pried? We thought the intruder went for it. We? He flinches. He corrects. Why was your phone in the garage earlier? Charging, too quick. The detective looks down, hides a small tell, then asks, were you planning to leave? The bus tickets appear on the table like an accusation wearing paper. The girl stares at them and chooses dignity over denial. We wanted space, she says. From what? The pause is a canyon. Everything, she whispers. The detective in his room changes posture, a pattern interrupt. Last question for now, she says. Did you love her more than you feared them? His eyes harden into frost. I didn't kill my parents. It's an answer to a different question on purpose. A lab tech opens the door, bag in hand. We pulled this from the vent, she says. And there's more. Router logs, a cloud address. The detective glances at the boy. We're going to pause. The word pause means pivot. Outside, in the hallway, the team gathers threads. Inside, 2 rooms settle into the quiet after performance, where strategy starts to crack. The first thing the footage gives is shape. Stairwell at a fixed angle. Kitchen entry framed by the island's edge. A slice of hallway where shadows elongate and lie. The lens is cheap but patient. It doesn't blink. It records arrival, hesitation, contact. No narrator, but time. Audio rides the same wire. It's mostly breath and house noises, compressor groans, generator hum, the wet tick of a drip. But in one banded section, a voice threads through like a vein. Please don't. Forensics tags the timestamp, isolates frequencies, scrubs the hiss until syllables stand alone. The phrase doesn't tell who. It tells proximity and fear. That's enough to narrow. Now, let's look at what blood says when nobody can argue back. Spatter forms a grammar. On the landing, thin arcs radiate inward, close in, medium velocity, evidence of a cut at intimate distance. On the kitchen floor, the pattern clusters low with a misted edge near the island lip, suggesting a thrust intersecting an exhale. Analysts map angles with string and laser, reconstructing the path of steel through space. The marks don't align with a stranger sweeping through in rage. They align with surfaces neighbors know without looking. The knife origin settles itself. A gap in the block, an empty slot, drawer prints wiped, but a crescent under the lip still holds oil ridges a bleach rag couldn't reach. It takes powder and patience to wake them. The handle shape matches the missing profile. The steel composition matches the kitchen set. A domestic pedigree in a violent act. No pry marks on the exterior window that would read as entry, only breaks that arc outward, glass fielding into the flower bed like theater set late. Hinges tell truth. They do not care about your story. The wrench is quieter. It sits wiped on the garage floor, too clean for a tool that lives with dust. Forensics lifts a partial from the shank where a thumb pressed hard before the bleach bath, spiral ridgelines like a topographic map of denial. The bat under the couch carries resin and a lattice of fine fibers, couch fabric, towel threads, suggesting a hurried kick, not a deliberate stash. Everything gestures towards staging. Nothing confirms invasion. But the real question is who put the eye in the vent. The camera itself is a retail unit, tiny board, pinhole lens, micro SD bypassed in favor of a hardline to a transmitter the size of a matchbox. The box hums on a frequency that slides past house Wi-Fi like a ghost. Network logs on the router tell a different story. They record a recurring handshake with an encrypted endpoint that routes through a vendor domain familiar to churches and small nonprofits. A habit of connection. Same hour, same length, weeks long. A lab tech follows the wire through drywall into a closet behind the office. The transmitter nestles behind hymnals that don't belong to this house, green spines stamped with gold numbers. The detail matters because it speaks to access. Whoever installed this had keys, time, and the confidence to move domestic objects without leaving resentment in their wake. Audio gives one more gift when slowed. A set of footsteps on the stairs, weight distribution different from the son's stride in the kitchen clip. Heavier on the outside edge, a slight roll-in at the knee. It's not a signature, it's a suggestion. Combine that with a rhythm tap on the rail, bat or ring, and the profile inches toward someone who believes the house is theirs to correct. The safe tells its own chapter. Pry marks fresh, paint curled like fingernails. Inside, trays for cash sit empty, dust outlines undisturbed where stacks should have been. An impression of a velvet box settles the ledger. The imprint is old, the removal new. The safe story doesn't shout theft. It whispers performance. Forensics dusts the edge of the door and finds a smear beneath the bend, human cells dragged thin. The DNA will read back as family, not outsider. A burned rag in the sink completes the domestic circle. The bleach pattern fans in a comet, tail pointing toward the island. In the fibers, micro droplets of blood fluoresce, proof that wiping came after contact. The oven clock, blink reset by the generator test, pegs a moment that anchors the sequence of lies. Porch camera timestamps from across the street dock beside it. The narrative tightens like a noose. Moving from the scene to the suspect's profile, investigators sketch a pair working in tandem, one decisive under threat, the other adaptive, softer in approach but equal in investment. Codependence reads in the spacing of prints, in the duplicate touches on the same hardware, in the mirroring of mistakes, the mind as locked box. Here, the lock was external, and the key hid in a vent. Which brings us back to the cloud. The endpoint pings to a storage account registered to a generic admin at a domain that manages church volunteer calendars and sermon uploads. Subpoena lands, metadata returns. Logins cluster around 3 devices: one office desktop, one tablet used for signups, one phone that roams from house to sanctuary and back. This isn't an outsider's hoard. It's an internal archive pretending to be security. So the invisible witness isn't faceless, it's structural. The lens in the duct, the wire through hymnals, the router handshake to a trusted vendor. These aren't choices a trespasser makes. They are the choices of authority, cloaked as care, turning a home into evidence long before blood ever hit tile. And once you see that, the question shifts. Not who struck first, who believed they had the right to watch. The detective stands in the doorway with a printout that changes the lattice. "We trace the feed," she says. "It routes to a cloud owned by a church vendor. The account is registered to your father's admin." The room tilts for both of them in different buildings. He blinks once, a slow recalibration. She stares at the tabletop and feels the vent air on her neck as if the duct had started breathing. Now, let's look at what that actually means. Surveillance wasn't a stranger's kink, it was policy. The pinhole wasn't an invasion from outside the family, it was a tool chosen by the people who set the rules. The detective drops 2 photos, closet hymnals. The transmitter crouched behind them. "We found these in your office," she says later, to a supervisor across glass. To the boy, she phrases it softer. "Did you know?" He shakes his head, truth and denial overlapping. "No." She holds his gaze. "Your parents did." Across the hall, the other detective slides the same photos toward the girl. "These belong to the church?" She nods automatically. She's filled those hymnals, counted them, stacked them after youth nights. "Your mother had access," the detective continues, tone careful. "Your father, too." The girl's mouth moves without words. The first betrayal threads through everything else, quiet and total. The burner phone isn't a ghost anymore. A tech walks in with another file. The pressure calls tie back to a prepaid that pinged near the office lot, he says. The detective doesn't look up. "Office as in church," she clarifies. He nods. "And," he adds, "a secondary number belonging to a friend of your father's shows up as a repeating contact the same days the notes arrived." She turns to the girl. "Did anyone ever warn you with kindness that felt like threat?" The girl nods once, a memory without a name. A firm hand on a shoulder, a flat voice saying, "We love you enough to stop you." Moving from the scene to motive, the profile shifts. This wasn't about money. The safe's emptiness was theater. The cash that mattered lived in attention, in control that masqueraded as care. The detective says it plainly to her partner. They were cornered into confession. The partner taps the vent photo. And someone was collecting receipts. But the real question is how far the parents planned to go. The detective pulls up a draft email from the father's account, recovered from autosave. Subject: family meeting, accountability. Body: we will involve leadership if necessary. Lines about purity and consequence, a meeting scheduled at the church office. That calendar square nests beside burner text timestamps like teeth in a zipper. She brings the boy a printout with the father's login history. "He approved the cloud the week the first note appeared," she says. "He set the rules, then documented the breaking of them." His face drains. "So, the burner was him?" "Not directly," she answers, exact. "A friend from his work phone relayed messages." "But the source?" "Yes." He swallows a dry thing. "Why?" The detective doesn't soften. "To control the narrative, to force you to speak it in a room he chose." In the other room, the girl hears the same words tilted at her mother. "Your mom's search history includes phrases like legal options for wayward minors and boarding school intake." The detective's voice is gentle, clinical. "She believed she was saving you from yourself." The girl almost laughs and it comes out as a cough. "They built a trap," she says, and the detective doesn't disagree. They built a frame for a confession. Everything changes when the detectives push the pinhole camera's audio through a filter that lifts a murmur embedded under the hum. A line from a week ago, the mother's voice in the stairwell, quiet and strained. "We'll give you one more day." It's not threat, it's ultimatum. It lands like a bell in both rooms. The boy closes his eyes. The girl presses a knuckle to her lip until the skin pales. The prosecutor steps into the hallway, eyes scanning the board. "We're done with greed," she says. "This is shame and control. Charge set remains the same. Theory of motive changes." The detective nods. Forbidden love as catalyst. Parental surveillance as accelerant. On the glass, she circles a single sentence. Who placed the final blow? Then she draws a second circle around a new question. Who lit the fuse? To the boy, she offers a thin mercy. "This doesn't absolve you," she says. "It contextualizes." He nods, grateful and ruined by the shape of the word. "They watched us," he says. "They watched us and then boxed us in." The detective doesn't fill the silence. He finally adds, "I thought the watcher wanted money." She answers, "The watcher wanted submission." To the girl, the detective offers something colder. "Your mother planned to involve the police," she says. "She called the moment she saw a fall she couldn't fix. She also helped build the pressure that broke the night." The girl nods, tears dry now, something harder forming. "She thought this was love," she says. "Maybe it was, the version she was taught." The detective doesn't argue. "Consider this," she says, low. "They thought surveillance would save you. It didn't." Which brings us to the title of the case file pinned at the top of the board by morning, The Watcher Revealed. Not a stranger in a hoodie, not a neighbor with a grudge. The lens belonged to the parents. The burner belonged to their circle. The pressure came disguised in church email signatures. Forbidden love didn't invent the violence. It met a system built to break it, and both failed in the worst way. The door to the interview room shuts like a verdict, and the silence that follows is the kind that magnifies defects. They sit on opposite ends of a plastic bench outside processing, wrists free, eyes trapped. The hallway smells like floor cleaner and recycled air. He keeps his gaze low. She studies him with a steadiness that used to mean safety. She starts blunt. "You hesitated." He flinches. "When?" Her mouth tightens. "When she was dialing? You could have taken the phone. You went for me." He exhales. "I couldn't see. The spray..." She cuts in. "You always say you couldn't see." He tries to pull them back to the we. "We were cornered. We planned together." She nods once, but the nod isn't agreement. It's acknowledgement of a record. "And you stabbed him," she says, the sentence landing on the tile between them. He breathes against the word. "It wasn't a choice. He blocked the exit. I slipped." She doesn't blink. "You didn't slip with her." A deputy clears his throat down the hall. Paper shuffles. The sound gives them a beat to recover or break. He takes it. "You opened the door," he says, softer. "You heard your name and opened the door." She swallows, the motion sharp. "She said my name." He doesn't press. "I know. The thing is, blame looks for the first clean surface. Tonight offers none. They try anyway." "You killed them," she says, voice flat, as if naming the obvious might contain it. He shakes, once. "We killed them," he answers, and the plural lands like a dare and a plea. She stares at the floor, fighting the drag of that we. "I didn't touch the knife." He nods, honest and cornered. "You didn't." Moving from the scene to motive, the detective's reframed theory leaks in through the walls. Surveillance as control, confession as design. It should unite them against the house that watched. Instead, it exposes fault lines that were there from the first late-night drive. She says, They were going to trap us. We knew. He says, "We could have told first." She laughs once without humor. "You deleted the audio." He folds forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped like a prayer inverted. "I did. I was scared." She inhales, holds it, lets it go. "I was scared too," she says, and for a blink they're back in the laundry room with the dryer thudding and sentences failing. But the real question is whether their pact survives scrutiny. A detective passes with a folder and doesn't look at them. He watches the motion and speaks like he's narrating to himself. "They have the vent. They have the cloud." She answers. "They have the bus tickets." He adds. "They have the bleach." She murmurs, "They have the locket," and touches the pocket where it would be if property hadn't bagged it, a tiny grief nested inside the large one. He pivots to logistics because logistics feel like control. "They'll charge me," he says. "They'll charge us," she corrects. He lifts his head, meets her eyes. "They'll say you planned." She doesn't look away. "Did I?" The question isn't rhetorical. It's a map of the last week. He revisits the parks, the mailbox, the knife drawer, the carrier bag, the note on the dresser. "We decided," he says, without heat. She nods. "We did." Everything changes when she imagines a jury that sees her as duped. The thought repulses her. "Don't make me the girl you saved," she says. "I won't," he answers. "Don't make me the boy you followed," she adds, and his mouth opens, then shuts. He shifts. "You weren't." She lets the word hang. "Say it," she presses. "I wasn't." He says it, and it helps, and it doesn't. Across the hall, a door opens. Voices clip, close. A paper slides under a rubber band. Plea angles drift through the air like the smell of coffee, present, not yet poured. He thinks in bargains. "If I take it," he says, "you—" She cuts him off. "Stop," he tries again. "If I say I—" "Stop," she repeats, crisp. "We don't fracture to fit their frame." She studies his bandaged hand. "It won't hold," she says quietly. He misreads. "The rap?" "The story," she says. He nods, slow. "Then? We tell a different one?" She almost smiles. "We tell the true one," she says, and he bristles. "We can't," she softens. "Not here, not now. But we don't lie to each other." He leans back to wall, lets the cool cinder block flatten heat. "I blamed you," he says. She blinks, surprised by the admission delivered so cleanly. "I blamed you," she returns. He nods. "We're even." She shakes her head. "We're not." Now, let's look at the fracture line neither wants to name. She wonders if loving him was always going to end here. He wonders if loving her is the only honest thing he's ever done. Both truths coexist and scrape. A deputy approaches. "They'll move you soon," he says. She stands first, spine straight. He rises slower. She looks at him like a ledger. "Whatever they ask," she says, "don't gift them our worst moments." He half smiles, empty. "I don't remember our best." She says, "I do." And the weight of that is a kind of sentence. He reaches a hand, not to touch, to hover, a habit from a week of cameras and codes. She steps half an inch toward it, then stops. "We," he says, a last try. She answers with the cruelest mercy. "For now," she says. Then the door opens, and the line between them becomes a hallway.